On the Modern Military History Podcast, we have been delving into the secret war that was fought by MACV-SOG in Laos, Cambodia, inside North and South Vietnam. We have interviewed warriors of MACV-SOG and heard their stories. On this episode of the Modern Military History Podcast, we will be speaking with the son of a SOG warrior who unfortunately did not make it home. Today we have Rich Fitz Jr. here to talk with us. Sir, welcome to the podcast and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Honored to be here. It's a pleasure.
Copy that. Sir, let's start from the beginning. Where were you born? When were you born?
August 11th, 1966, in one town over from where I am right now in Weymouth, Massachusetts.
Gotcha. And is that where you grew up? Grew up there as well?
In a way. My childhood was kind of divided into two memorable sections, I guess you could say. Early on, I was living in Abington. A couple of years when my father was just went overseas, my mother and myself moved in with his parents. A little background, both families are from Abington. So very small knit community thing. But for a few years, I think it was 2 years or so, give or take, when my father was first went overseas, we lived with his parents a couple miles down the road. A couple years after that, we moved in with my mother's parents on the property that I am living in right now. It was about 1975. My father was still missing or whatever, and we moved to Pembroke right about that time, and my mother started a horse farm, and I lived there until probably, well, off and on, late teens, I should say, after graduation. Moved to a couple different places, lived with a couple girlfriends or whatever, but ended up getting married and moving back into Abington and renting a little cottage on the same property, and eventually, through many years, I built a house behind the cottage, and I'm here now.
Wow. Dang. A couple of things kind of come up. First thing is growing up on a horse farm. What was that like?
Well, I have some funny pictures, because I was like maybe a year and a half. I was already showing on horseback. That was my mother's love. I know my father was very interested in horses too. Some of the common interests that those two had when they were younger. But my mother was just infatuated with horses, and took it to a very high level. I mean, we were showing everywhere. She was breeding, training, boarding horses, raising them, everything, and I myself had literally showed horses on 3 different types of seat: hunt seat, saddle seat, western. I did a little bit of dressage and all that stuff, but right around, 11, 12 years old, it really wasn't my thing anymore, and I'm sure my mother wasn't happy. She wanted me to ride all my life, but I preferred the 2 wheels on a dirt bike than I did the horses. I said, I'm out. Once I felt that, I was like, no, this is what I want to do. So, that's when I started sowing my oats, so to speak, in my own world, and from there it was rock and roll. Infatuation, love affair with rock and roll guitar, and I did boxing and all my other different things, and just that's what started it. I just had that teen angst and found my own ways to do things, and I was on my own. See you later.
Copy that.
Not literal,
Copy
but
that.
In the brain sense, I was like, no, these are the things that I want to do. So
understood. Understood. Yeah, I recently made the decision to move out of my mom's house, and it's been almost 6 months now, and it's like one of the best decisions I've ever made. Nothing against my mom, nothing against living at home, but you got to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I live with mom still, for quite a while, but, finding things that you love and you want to do on your own are a big thing of, really growing up. I mean, it was a little different. I mean, we had over 16 acres of land there, and abutted many, many acres, and that's all. I was never home. I was either in the woods or dirt bike riding, or eventually I did something very similar to the studio I was showing you here. I had a little makeshift rehearsal studio for all my bands. I started playing guitar in, I don't know, probably 6th, 7th grade. But by the time I was in high school, I was trying to get bands together. And my mother was, always out doing something, but she was very cool as far as open-minded and allowed my friends to come over and have a place to play. So that, that's where I kind of started learning everything, was in my own house with as many band people I could get to come over.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's quite a paradox from, what I eventually was tossed in the middle of, which we will get into.
Sure. This kind of leads into my next question. So, your dad, was in the Army. It sounds like, well, first I want to back up here. Do you know how your dad and your mom met? Do you know how they met?
Again, they were in the same, high school, same town. My father, I do believe, I could be wrong, but my mom's mother worked literally right down the corner from where I am right now. There was a place called Sunnyfields, little, I think it was a breakfast joint or a little restaurant or whatever. But I know my father was working part-time, either busing or dishes or something there. And my mother's mother was working there, and they kind of knew each other from there. It was a small town, and my father had the interest of horses, and this was at the time when my father and mother were kind of in the same high school. Obviously, my father was 2 years older, but that's kind of how they met, just around town. And eventually, my father did 2 years in high school in the regular Abington High School, but then a Votech had opened up a couple towns over, and he ended up going, his last 2 years of high school were in the new Votech, and he was actually in the very first graduating class of the vocational technical school.
What were his plans to what was his plans, in terms of like the vocational education? What was he specializing in?
Well, then he was in automotive.
Okay.
But, that really leads me down a crazy road, because I know he had talked about when he got out of the Army that, he was thinking about becoming a state trooper. But, he had so many different, at a young age, it's so many different likes or interests. You say likes and interests, but he did so many different things. I mean, martial arts, he was like a 3rd-degree brown belt, and I can't even remember what style it was. All before he went in the Army, knew how to scuba dive.
Whoa.
Already. You know what I mean? It's just all these things that I was finding out, again, he could ride horses. There's all these crazy things that he knew. Like, he'd go out shooting, I guess with my mother's father early on to kind of smooth things over in a very young relationship. They made a couple plans to go out together and hang out, and they used to go out shooting. And even my grandfather was like, my mother's father, he was like, yeah, he had something that I never did. He just had that certain things. And there's just so many different things that I can't even, I'm sure I'll think about it, but
no worries
as I go.
But jack of all trades.
Well, that's what I mean. And at such a young age, it's just kind of mind-boggling in a way that the amount of information that he just kind of absorbed. And I think that kind of played into what, where he went, the direction he went.
Yeah. Do you know what his process was like for deciding to join up and go into the military?
Well, I think there are a couple different things, I think, in this. Obviously, his father was in the military. He comes from a family of 4 brothers.
Oh.
The oldest brother never went in. Second oldest, I might have these wrong, but one was in the 82nd and the other one was in the 101st.
Whoa. Airborne.
Yep. And he went in, and typical, mentality. But I'm sure it's because his father was in. I'm sure it's just the mentality of even the times, and it was a little, that was all volunteer stuff. Mm-hmm. He didn't enlist. Mm-hmm. He didn't get, drafted. He enlisted, which was kind of unheard of up here, up on the East Coast in Boston, because if you really start to peel away the layers of the onions, a lot of those SOG guys or SF guys that enlisted, a lot of them were Southern boys. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, it was still very, kind of, it wasn't very conservative up here, just as it is now. And it was very, it's still very liberal. And kind of rare that you actually got somebody that would enlist from this area and have that mentality.
Sure. You mentioned your grandfather, your dad's dad was in the military. Do you know anything about his service? Do you know anything about what he did?
That's pretty bad. I really don't. I should know.
That's okay.
Both my grandfathers were in World War II.
Okay.
I don't know. I know my mother's grandfather was on a PT boat in the Philippines. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know my father's father. I don't know what he did. I know he got a Purple Heart, but I don't know the details. And it's an odd thing because, and I don't want to glaze over this in a way, but the truth of the matter is that those two sides of the family, just went separate ways.
Yeah.
And we, unfortunately, we weren't very close. There were some personal reasons here and there that, mm-hmm. Life takes weird turns sometimes. And
copy that.
It's kind of, I don't even know how to explain it.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
Well, it's not that I don't want to. It's just so hard to explain because it's, I was, again, both of us, my mother and myself, just felt like we were not really included in a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? And, we'll fill in. I'm sure some of your questions coming up will probably tie some of this in, So, go ahead.
Gotcha. Oh, hey, no worries. Moving back to your dad, so he enlisted, went Army, went Green Beret. When did he go overseas? You said you were born in 66. Nam is already going in 66. When did your dad head over to Vietnam?
Yeah, he wasn't there that long. I'm pretty sure it was I'm going to say late August, early September of 68.
Mm-hmm. 68, gotcha.
Yeah. He as a matter of fact, he and the gentleman that went over with him, they were good friends. They went over at the same time, and they ended up getting on the same team. They were in a training group together, and they went over in the same flight. And went over there. And if I recall, there was a pretty heavy sapper attack in August. Mm-hmm. And my father and this gentleman, Krause, Brian Krause, they were actually replacements for some of the people that got killed. It's because, as a matter of fact, I was told by Krause that when they were first got to, I want to say, Da Nang or whatever, that wherever they were bunking, they could still they still had mortar on holes and blood and everything else right where they were, sleeping from the attack. Yeah.
Jeez, I think it was Da Nang that was hit.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Da Nang that was hit pretty bad. Which is kind of an interesting decision made on the VC part. Let's hit the Special Forces compound, and needless to say, not a lot of them made it out, but there were casualties. So coming into country as a replacement, what do you have a final memory of your father before he left? Do you have that?
You know, for decades, I had one and didn't even realize it. And this is why I can tell you. Now, you have to understand that not a lot of people have memories at 2 years old.
Yeah.
You know, that's how old I was. I was a little over 2 years old. But to answer the question, it was a very foggy memory that I had. And I specifically remember, in my mind, my father's father taking me up to the kiddie jump tower at Fort Bragg and going off the zip line. I remember going up there, a little over 2 years old, just hang on, and went down.
Wow.
And this is no lie. So that was a memory that I had. It was very foggy, but I just, again, my brain was, it's my father's father. And decades, even after I'll get into this later, but the second funeral, 1990, there was, I don't know how long after that, but it was one sit-down evening. I was just chatting with my mother about it, and I said the same thing I just said to you to her. And she looked at me cross-eyed. She says, "That was your father, not your grandfather." So
wow.
All those years I was under the assumption, because you're 2 years old. It's a murky, foggy memory. Yeah. You don't see a face. You remember a masculine figure, older figure. And, you grow up so long without that there, you naturally think it couldn't be him. Not that I am consciously thinking that, but I'm just replacing it with the closest thing that I would think. And come to find out, it was my father.
What's the next? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Go ahead.
All right. What's the next memory that you have relating to your dad?
Well, this is going to sound cold, but nothing. The only thing I had was, some stuff that was sent home, lots of different fatigues and stuff like that, some various medals and stuff. I had a lot of FM manuals, and I even have some of the uncensored ones.
Oh, really?
Nobody's getting their hands on those.
Copy that. That's cool.
And, I had even like a little, this was kind of cool, especially when I did the film, but a tiny little pocket daily diary type of thing. And there were little, every once in a while, there's little writings in there from training. And it was kind of eye-opening. And a lot of stuff in there that at the same time, there was little sections in it that just said CT, which I eventually found out was classified training. And there was also a section in there that he was, really, obviously myself and my mother were on his mind. And he almost had a bad accident in training, and he put it in the diary. He says, I almost blew up some of my men today. I have to get Richie and Vicky off my mind. I could have killed somebody today. So, there's a lot of really good insight in there, but it's only little sections, a little paragraph here and there, a sentence here and there, or, and the couple things I still don't know. I'm going to have to bend, Tilt's ear, or a couple other people there that probably went through the same thing, but I'll figure it out eventually,
Yeah.
But all these little, like I said, all these little tokens or trinkets or books, and everything was like, I've said it a million times. I've said it in the film. It's kind of like you're reading about a fictional character. You know, I had nothing tangible. So that's, when you talk about any other memories, the memories are the material things that I'm looking at. And we have very, very few pictures. Very few.
Yeah.
So you look at every picture and you're constantly looking for something different in it. And it's just not there. Same with these items. Half the items, more than the items, I didn't even know what they were. And as a matter of fact, I spoke about it once. There was one, a dingy old little T-shirt. My father was tiny, a tiny guy. And I remember when I was late high school, I could barely fit into any of his stuff. So, and I'm tiny. So, but I remember going through some of the stuff, and there was this old T-shirt. It was all yellow, kind of old, just beat up T-shirt. And it had this faded, like, weird word on it. And I kept going, what the hell is it? And it looked like O, and then it looked like what looked like an FOF, and then a 5 or an S, and then there was some kind of weird 3 or something, or looked like another S, but it was all faded. Well, you know what? I don't know if they did this, but I put 2 and 2 together just within the last few years. And I think what it was, I think it said Ops 35.
Oh.
That's what I think it was. And it took me years to go, I bet now I don't have the T-shirt anymore. I just remembered those faded marks out of memory. I mean, that thing was destroyed by moths and who knows what, right? And it was all beat up then anyway. And I said, I wonder if they, that's how they were getting assigned to something, if that's one of maybe some of the camps or whatever. Here, you're assigned Ops 35. Here, put that on your T-shirt. I don't know. I have no idea, but that's what I thought it was. It was the closest thing that I could think of, other than the word office, like dunce cap. You know what I mean? Who knows?
Yeah. When did you guys? How old were you when you received news that something had happened to your dad in Vietnam?
Well, I don't know the exact date. It was early. It could have been in '68 when the first one came by, but there was the casualty officers came looking for my mother, but they came to my grandparents on her side of the family. They went there first, and they were looking for her to tell her that he was missing. And I'm pretty sure that was either very late '68 or early '69. Because, it was November of '68 where the incident happened. It was the end of November. November 30th. So, I had heard things like the standard procedure there anyway was to wait a couple weeks just in case somebody came walking out of the jungle or whatever,
Yeah.
Not that this, they're not going to tell you anything anyway at that point. They knew that, the eyewitnesses knew that there was no way anybody was getting out of that.
So what did they tell your mother? Did they tell her that he was MIA, or were they definitive on that very first notification that he was KIA?
The notification of KIA was never mentioned.
Really?
Yep, they kept it missing in action.
So you guys were notified MIA.
Yep. Until 75, I think it was late 74, give or take. My mother had gone back and asked them to reopen the case and let them, make a determination. Because at this time it was 69, 70, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
And so they decided to say a presumption of death.
Yeah.
That's how they worded it. And that's when it led into the first funeral.
Yeah.
No body, no proof, just a funeral.
How'd your mom take it getting the news of MIA, and then for years later not receiving any clarification.
Well, again, in the film, she kind of says it for herself. She goes, when she first was told, she had just recently had a letter sent home saying that he was injured. He admitted getting injured. And so she just thought that they had it wrong, that they were confusing his injury with something else. So, it was kind of, everything was so secret anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, even back then in the training, he couldn't tell her what he was doing. So she was kind of used to the secrecy.
Yeah.
So I guess putting things together in her own head,
What, in your own words, tell the audience what we now know happened to your dad.
Okay, well, I guess in layman's terms, it's just better. We all know that SOG is a highly classified, covert situation, and nobody was going to admit that we were involved in that, and any admittings of that would probably, well, not probably, but definitely would pique curiosity and questions. Which is, also probably why they, yes, they didn't get a lot of medals, but they didn't pursue awarding medals, because they're going to award medals to some place we weren't supposed to be. We would have acknowledged stuff that, weren't supposed to be there. And again, this is volunteer stuff. This was all their choice. But what happened was that in November 30th, 1968, my father's regular team, RT Maryland, Recon Team Maryland, which is some of the, this work that I've done, I've concluded that, him and Bryant Krause were on downtime because they had done more than their share of missions. And all of a sudden, a volunteer type of thing came down last minute. And that mission was under the code name Eldest Son, which was to insert booby-trapped ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed to, in this case, it was mortar rounds. There were two different names at different times. I've heard many different things, that it was either different times or the size of the ammo dictated what it was called. But Italian green, and I think pole bean was another one, but it was all under the Eldest Son project. And for those who don't know, Eldest Son, I do believe the CIA had specialists maybe in Okinawa or something, but if some of these teams or whatever would find caches of ammo or whatever, they would send them to, I believe it was Okinawa, and these specialists would take them apart, booby trap them, put them all back together so you couldn't tell. And these pieces of ammo were peppered into different, distributed into the enemy's arsenal. So anyway, there were mortar rounds. I do believe there was maybe a dozen cases. This mission was attempted a couple different times, and both times it was turned back by weather. Lynn Black, as a matter of fact, was one of the ones. Blackjack was on the one right before this. The one got turned down. It was also John McGovern. He was also one of the guys. There was a few other guys involved in all this, but anyway, it was a last-minute volunteer. Hey, I need guys. I think it was Clyde Sincere that said, "Hey, gentlemen, I need some volunteers." So my father was one of them, and so was Art Bader. And Art Bader was on RT Maryland with my father and Krause. And Krause was Bader was the only one from his regular team that was on that volunteer mission. Everybody else was picked and chose or whatever. If you already had your CIB or whatever, that might have dictated some of it. As a matter of fact, in my film, the late and great Eldon Bargewell gave me a quick interview about this, because he was there while Clyde was getting volunteers, and he even said that there were some new guys that they were just gonna. It was supposed to be an easy missions, half a day, if that, which is nothing for them. Get over to the site, predetermined on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and drop it somewhere where they think that the enemy will find it. And I'm sure something would have been like, maybe fake a firefight just to get their attention and get the hell out. So they'd come and find the ammo and distribute it through their ranks. But there were, from what I understand, there was also 2 other escorting choppers, but most of the men got on one chopper, which is not a normal thing to do. So there were 6 other Green Berets and 3 Vietnamese pilots on a King B CH-34. They made they took off, made their attempt to go to the determined site. And before they got there, they ran into AAA fire. I could be wrong. It's probably one of those heavy areas that they talk about, Oscar 8, something like that, where they had so many AAA in the canopy, and it was a very nasty area. But one of the escorting gunships was a gentleman that I got the honor of interviewing, and he said that it didn't take a direct hit, but some shrapnel hit it, and they went into a spiral. It didn't, his eyewitness said it didn't. His accounting said it didn't explode in the air, but it went in a spiral and kind of slid into the side of an area, and within seconds, the thing exploded. And he said it was like a white phosphorus type of explosion. Yeah. And more than likely that the root cause of it was the booby-trapped ammunition that they had on board. Just went up. So when they hit the ground, first of all, he says nobody could have survived that because of how high they hit. But when the ammo went, that was it. And so that was their demise. 7 Green Berets and 3 South Vietnamese pilots. Okay. And they tried to, not that they tried to go in right away, but there was so many reports of the North Vietnamese already knew where the chopper was, and they were trying to surround it. So going in was, kind of futile. But that's something we didn't find out. We heard stragglings of that story for many years, but it was never... Well, I always heard it was either it was coming back after the attempt, which wouldn't make sense seeing the explosion. The eyewitness said that the explosion, the smoke was like, it wasn't consistent with like helicopter fuel or anything like that. It was more of a, white phosphorus burns differently. So that wouldn't make sense, because if they were coming back, that stuff would have been offloaded already. Yeah. So they were going in. But for years we heard different things. I've heard, how many people I've heard tell me that they saw my father, or they know he's captured, or they got pictures of him. And I've heard all this bullshit for... since I was a wee little lad. And, I get very cynical when people talk about, I knew this or I was there, and, believe me, I've heard it all. And unless you have damn proof, I don't want to hear it, So hooking up with the real guys was something that, I can't change, and I hope I'm trying desperately to get over to SOAR again, but I'm broke as a joke. So I'm hoping I can get there again. Hopefully I can drag my son this time, get him over there and meet some of these guys. But it's kind of like a new family, and our first meetings were There's a lot of apprehension. There was a lot of emotion. Some of us didn't know how to quite approach each other for good reason on both sides. It's a heavy thing, but wouldn't change it,
Gotcha.
So anyway, after that many years, that's what happened. Like I said, in a nutshell, we kind of heard tricklings of this, but nothing definite. A lot of questions, a lot of different scenarios. But in late 89, I think it was, well, actually earlier, 89, I got 2 phone calls, one from my grandfather, from my father's father, and Lieutenant Colonel Jim Cole, I think. Yes. And I talked to him on the phone, and pretty much got the same statements about that they found the crash site, found remains, and they are fairly certain that they are some are my father's. And at the same time, there was a independent forensic investigation going on. So it wasn't just the Army labs in Hawaii and all that. We had our own done. And my father was identified by 2 teeth. No DNA, just teeth, matching up dental records.
Wow.
And there was
200
and something other bone fragments, and I don't think any of them were more than 4 or 5 inches long.
Wow. So when was the first funeral held?
The first one was in 75. That's when, they had a presumption of death. That's when some of the benefits started from my mom. She used that money actually to do the down payment on the horse farm in Pembroke, and Pembroke, Mass. And that's what got that started. I think it was more of a fresh start for her,
Yeah.
But again, it's not, that's something, a fresh start like that is, you don't really have a fresh start because there's nowhere to go. That's like you're just nothing but, questions. There was no solid, yes, this is it, and now you can move on. I think it was still even hard for her in 90, And, even in 90, there were still times that we were put aside. We weren't, if you go back and find all the news footage and all the interviews, 90% of them, we are not involved. And a couple of them were, and that's because some people had said, hey, they saw what was going on and said, what?
Yeah.
Why aren't you talking to him? Why aren't you talking to her? So, and at the time, to be honest with you, and even still, I don't know all the answers. Some people knew more than I did, but when this all happened, I was basically thrown into it in the middle of it all. In years, I hadn't been any involvement at all.
Yeah.
So I was, I say it in the movie, I was a long-haired 80 rock and roll guitar player, trying to do the best I could to be that the rock and roll icon with the long hair and everything, and I got tossed in the middle of a sea of Green Berets and White House dignitaries and everything else, and it was the craziest dichotomy you could ever imagine.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the second funeral and the events leading afterwards. This it's just incredible what as you've started to touch on this dichotomy, what happened afterwards. So lead us through that.
Well, I think now that I look back at it, I think I had a stigma in my mind about it, and it was probably the unknown. Meaning that I didn't think somebody in my world, coming from, the long hair stuff, the music, the rock and roll, I didn't think somebody in that world could fit into what I was involved in, because it was so far, away from me. So that was very, very, very nerve-wracking, and I've told people, I don't mean to say this for sympathy, but a few months before I even heard about this, I started getting the weirdest stuff going on in my world. I came down with some kind of weird neurological thing. And I haven't even been 100% since then. But, I mean, it was strange. To give you an idea of what I was going through, I had like motor function, there was no concentration. Every time I would get into any physical activity, the only way I can tell you is, have you ever had a high fever? 102, 103, something really, really nasty? Well, if you mix that, how about, have you ever been almost asleep, but not quite? Or when you wake up, you're so foggy and you're not quite awake, you're just like really lethargic? Well, put those two feelings together, all right? You don't have the heat and the sickness from the fever, but that's what every day looks like. That's what it was. And every time I would go into do any physical thing, if I was to read something, if I was to watch TV, if I was to get into any physical exercise, and I was constantly exercising, Again, I was into music and everything, but, I came from boxing and very athletic and stuff like that. So I had all these things that I would love to do, but all of a sudden this hit me, and it gradually kept getting worse. So every time I try to do what I do, I couldn't even play guitar. I lost my job because of it. I couldn't work. And I had 2 spinal taps. I had over 200 and something different blood tests, brain tests, all this other stuff. But point was, all this stuff started happening, and then I get the phone calls. So all throughout this whole thing, this is what I was dealing with while I was going through this. So I was so detached, and that just made everything worse. I mean, that's an emotional, Ferris wheel.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just like that without being sick.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people said, oh, it's because of the emotions and this and that. I said, well, wait a minute. It happened before I even got the info. So it can't, unless there's some kind of weird, powers that be that's going on, I can't directly relate it to that, because I didn't find out until after I was sick that all this was going to happen. That I didn't get the phone calls until after this started happening. So that's what I was dealing with at the time. And so, like you talk about the dichotomy and everything else, I was trying to learn all these, acronyms and everything else, and people are talking about stuff that I had no clue about. So when you put it all together, it's, at the time, it's this incredible insecurity about, do I fit in with who my father was? And how can I can't even connect with these guys, because I can't even think right now. I can barely stand up. And, every 15 minutes I had to go and sit down or chill out or go somewhere where there was nothing going on, because I was just freaking out. And it just took my nerves and just shot them to all hell. And I mean, I didn't have a very fluffy life since I was very, very young. So, I had a lot of anxiety and stuff going on as it was. And then all this stuff happened, and it just, threw me for a loop.
Yeah.
And so that's since then I've been, like I said, I haven't been 100%, but I never have since. But I've just pushed myself through it, because nobody gave me answers.
Copy
all
that.
Those doctors, all those tests, everything. Lyme disease tests, all this other crap. Whatever it was, I just haven't been the same since, but I've pushed myself through it. And, I just deal with it day by day, and my memory's fried because of it. I will learn to, even this subject, it sounds so bad. There's so many people that, like maybe yourself and people that, you would think that somebody's father that was in SOG would, this guy would know everything about it. But man, there are things that I keep forgetting about it, and it's not intentional, and you don't want to be a jerk, but there's so many people out there that know so much more than I do. And I think half of it's because they can retain it better. You know what I mean? I was just, my brain's just fried because of all that stuff,
Yeah.
But I've done what I can, I try to look at this like if I don't forget, at least I have the people that I can call and say, hey, you know, and everything that I do is out of respect for these guys, because they're kind of my pseudo father now, you know, and you don't do anything to tarnish memories or names, because I consider it a part of my family now, and so you don't, you know, I don't say that I tread lightly, but you know, you do unto others as you know,
Yes.
will want them to do to you, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, and if I can trust them, they can trust me, that type
Yeah.
of thing, you know. So I think, you know, if there's anything, like I said, that I'll forget or I get questions, I just make a phone call or send a text and you know, tell them flat out, sorry, my brain's fried, I couldn't remember that. But you know what? During this whole thing, and even with the film that we might talk about, I have actually put some of the questions together. You know, because there were a lot of people that didn't really know that my father was on Recon Team Maryland. You know, so I was able to piece some of this together, you know, small bits, but, you know, really made me feel kind of proud that I was able to piece some of these together and kind of help, you know, put these little tiny puzzles into the place, because they're all trying to do that, you know, and not everybody has it right. And you can't expect them to. Memories, years, no records, you know, it's natural to forget these things. And
Absolutely.
you know, not to mention the stress level that they were going through, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, I did a small part and kind of connected a few dots. So
Yeah. I think what's incredible is that, you know, whatever barriers you're dealing with aside, your work with 21 Years of Folded Flag, I mean, I really want to talk about that. That's how we met.
Yeah.
That's how we met. Tilt Meyer, John Stryker Meyer put us in contact because of this project you're working on. So, in your own words, I mean, well, just to let people know, 21 Years of Folded Flag is a film you made, you know, about this incredible story, about, you know, all of it. And when did that become an idea for you? I know, you know, for the audience, there's a guitar behind you. You've talked about your rock and roll life. You know, I'm seeing a music. That's right. I'm seeing a music background. When did film become when did this pop into your mind, and how did that journey start?
Who knows? Honestly, I'll try to take you through it.
Yeah, please do.
And as we were touching on about the respect, and I'll try to keep this going in the right direction. Sometimes, again, my brain goes in different directions, so bear with me.
No worries. That's what I'm here for.
So in
I
1990,
got
we
you.
were just talking about that funeral. Everybody, so many people are just, man, you got such an incredible story. I mean, here I am, a musician, and with all the hype of this thing going on, I literally had the 15 minutes of fame. Everybody around here was calling me up. Oh my God, that's right. Oh my God, everybody knew it. Everybody, not just around here. It was huge. But there was something in my head. Everybody's saying, "Oh, you got a great story. You got to do this. You got to do that." And I'm like, first of all, out of respect, I didn't have a clue. And I said, you know, it just wasn't right to sit there and go, okay, let's go grab Joey Porter. Let's get on this. There was something personal about it, deep down, that I said, you know what? It's not going to do anybody any respect. I don't even have a desire to do that, because I have to learn. I have to get involved with this. I have to do this for me, and for my father, and for those guys, and for everybody involved. You know, I have to learn about it. I can't go spewing about it. I don't know. It's not respectful to do that. I had to, and I say exactly this in my film. Well, I might be paraphrasing, but I didn't have to learn about it, but I should have. And if I was going to go blabbing and shoot my mouth off, yeah, that would have been fine, because I'm a Gold Star son that, you know, his father was killed in this highly classified unit and blah, 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 right? Not to belittle it, but I could have got away with that with no problem. But in here, and to the gentlemen that were with him, I didn't think that was right. I wanted to give myself time to learn at least what I could about it, to let it all sink in. If I didn't take the time to do that, I don't think I would have been right inside. Whether I knew that or not, I don't know. But this is what I'm getting at, is all these people are telling me this, and for years. But a lot of it, I don't know if I was ready to face it or not. But I didn't know how to. And there's a lot of time barriers too. I mean, now I'm married, I'm divorced, I got a very young son. Years, decades have gone by now. But then I started thinking about it. I started seeing the books being written. I started seeing this. I'm like, wait a minute, I thought this was classified. You know what I mean? And that's another thing, because there were people telling me that this is still classified. I had people, it took me years to find out, one of the gentlemen, is it David Maurer? I think that's his name. I remember him in 1990 took me aside, and there was one funeral here in Abington, then there was a mingled funeral down in Arlington National. When I was down there, this gentleman, I'll never forget him, he just had the suit on, and he looked like the epitome of like a Hollywood CIA guy, like he'd be that perfect role, and he took me aside. He goes, "No one ever told you what happened?" I said, "No." And he's the one that broke it down in details for me. Very first. He goes, "This stuff is all classified." He told me. He goes, "We all know it, but..." So
was this in 1990?
This was in...
Was this in...
Yeah. About 3 months after the first, the funeral in Abington. They had the common burial. They have all the names of the other guys on that, including my father, because their remains were, all together when they were found. Anyway, so what I was saying is, like, now I also have this thing in my head where, I have classified info. It's not like I want to go and, I told a couple people about it, close friends, but, I never talked a lot about it, Some of the guys I even talked about were young guys that were in the military that I was working with. I said, military, it took a while for me to get to know them, but when I did, I started talking about it, they didn't believe me. I'm like, yeah, right. That type of shit, So,
yeah.
Whatever. So what made me eventually, some people started calling, some people started reaching out. Brian Krause reached out to me early 90s, I think it was, a couple of years after the funeral. And I was floored on the phone. He was telling me details. And I remember reading about some of it in my father's letters. And I'm like, whoa, this guy can't be telling me bullshit. Something is clicking here. And I'd ask other people in military, and they're like, "Oh, no, everybody wants to say they're in SOG. It sounds like bullshit. It sounds like this." So now I don't even know to believe this guy. This guy falls off the face of the earth for another 10 years. All right? So there was that day that I said to my mom, she's the only connection I have, right? And I asked her a simple question, don't even know what the question was. I said, "Hey, Mom, didn't you say this about my father?" Just, now listen, we get older, can't remember, and that's what happened. Innocently.
Yeah.
She says, I don't remember. Okay. Well, another good chunk of time goes by, and now my son is looking at me in my eyes. Poses the same question, says, "Hey, didn't you say this about your dad?" I said, "You know what? I can't remember." That's what kicked me in the ass.
Yeah.
So now you want to talk about how the movie and the idea, all this was I have stacks of stuff. Now, by this time, my father's parents had both passed. I had gotten some of the stuff left to me that they had, etc. And I said, I should really start grabbing some of this stuff. Old VHS tapes, everything, it's in my basement. I at least want to get it digitized.
Yeah.
Try to preserve it. So here's a really crazy thing. I was introduced to a gentleman who does rock and roll videos. He's pretty successful. He's done boxing shows. He's done it. His boxing show was international. you know.
Wow.
And again, a musician friend of mine introduced me, this is Rudy Childs, and I'm shaking his hand, Richard Fitz, and he goes, Richard Fitz. So are you related to that soldier that was missing for like 21 years? I said, yeah, kind of. I'm his only son, Well, come to find out, this guy's parents were good friends with my father's parents.
Whoa.
And come to find out, he says, yeah, he goes, I was living down in Maryland at the time that, he had the funeral and everything. So I went to D.C. and I went to the Common Burial in Arlington National. I put together a little video for them and everything years and years ago. I'd never met the guy. He was weird. I'm meeting him through the music world, right? Totally crazy.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, man, can you help me out? I just want to kind of digitize this stuff. And, that's how it was. He's a mile and a half from my house. So I go up to his place, right? And the poor bastard, I got literally a Rubbermaid tote full of VHS tapes and all this shit, right? And he's giving me the eye roll. He's like, oh, here we go, right?
Yeah.
And, this is no lie. Reaches down in. First VHS tape he pulls out was the tape he did for my grandparents 20 years
Oh, my
before.
God.
I had never known. Is that crazy or what? So that's how it started. And so we started doing this, and we were getting together here and there, and I was telling him, I said, someday I'd like to do a documentary or something. And everybody tells me you got a good story and blah, blah, blah. So a few meetings into it, he finally said, yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. We had no idea, neither did he. As a matter of fact, he didn't tell anybody he was doing it because it was so different. Plus, there was no records. There's no footage. There's no this, there's that. So that's how this happened. And all of a sudden, it started growing some legs. And, we did a couple of unfinished versions. We tried it out at small film festivals and stuff like that. But sure enough, the first one we entered, it came with best documentary or something like that. Wow. That was an unfinished version.
Wow.
It wasn't even done. So, he had his own ideas about how some of it good. No, I've never done film. Never. I needed somebody with the expertise in the tech area to be able to put it together. But I don't think he really understood how much of a concept I was able to work with. Again, there was nothing on paper. Just kind of put it together as we went. Now, here's another thing. There was stuff I was finding out as I was doing this.
Sure.
All of a sudden, I find myself traveling. I'm going to meet SOG guys. I'm finding stuff out as this is all happening. And some guiding force that was just going, hey, you got to go here. Hey, you got to go. It's just weird. But it's funny because now that the film is finished, it's almost like now I want to do another version, whether it's a second part. I think what I've already started doing is actually writing a book.
Wow.
And I did start it. I got about 10,000, maybe 12,000 words so far, but I had to put everything on hold. As I showed you earlier, the studio has been all broken down. I don't have the creative space, but I'm getting there. But once I get that back, I can get my head back into it. But I think not to belittle what we have with the film now, but there's just no space to put in everything that I found out. Yeah, so it's got to be a completely different thought process. And I think this time I'm going to kind of be open. And a lot of people that I've thought best-selling authors I've talked to, they say you got to be really truthful. You got to open up and expose good, bad, and indifferent. And I think it's not going to be a very happy book, but it's going to get into the direction that my life took and what happened. And it's, not fault of anybody, but, if you don't have a guidance there, people will be amazed at what a father figure can actually do, good, bad, or indifferent. If you don't have that, and not to mention, we didn't have any advocacy. We didn't have any help. A lot of times, again, as I said earlier, if they're going to offer you help, that means they're going to admit to something. And that's at least how it came across, especially that I'm older. It's like, there wasn't a lot of help there. Yes, we did get some military benefits, but, case in point, I still was, a lot of direction. I was kind of a lost puppy in a way, and there was a lot of negative things that happened in my life that, like I said, I'm going to get into in the book, but expose some things that I think you'll be surprised that I'm even still breathing. And it was not good stuff. And there are days that I have that are dark. But I think I want to put that in there to let people understand that, these things sometimes can be pretty negative, but in a way, again, I don't look for sympathy, but you also have to, I think some of these people have to understand that there are sacrifices that people in my shoes go through too.
Yeah.
And maybe you should kind of look at it and appreciate it a little different, and kind of realize these things,
I know that it was important to have you here in this space. It's hard for me to kind of explain, but we met, we worked together. I really enjoyed, getting to know you in just the short time we had. And, Tilt, really exemplifies this. And since he's a mutual, acquaintance of ours, I'll use him as an example. Tilt lifts up his fellow veterans. He lifts them up in his books. And, the man has written multiple books, even in the books that are about him, and I mean air quotes, they're about him, 50% of the book is about other guys' stories, across the fences like that. It's really the SOG. John Plaster wrote SOG books. That's how I got introduced to SOG history, and John Plaster's books, for the most part, are about other guys' stories. He did write an autobiography, but what I'm saying is there's this culture in the SOG community that it's like lifting up other people's stories to support. So I don't know. I just thought, and it's also an incredible opportunity to talk about just what you're talking about, the impact the Secret War had, and it wasn't just the guys. It didn't happen in a vacuum, even though the U.S. Government wished it did. They had them sign non-disclosure forms. It didn't happen in a vacuum because those guys left people at home. John Stryker Meyer talks about how his trash was getting looked through to make sure he wasn't writing home about it. Yep. His family knew something was going on. Even after the war, 20 years, non-disclosure agreement, couldn't talk about it. And he said it was the community that helped him get through. He was lucky enough that there was another Trenton, New Jersey guy who had gone into SOG, and they would meet together and talk in a corner of a bar, and they had each other. The SOG community, and it's just when I in my own way am trying to tell this story and get this some bandwidth with our modern society, so to speak, I just knew that if you were willing, and I'm just so grateful that you have been. It's like, we need to share this part of it, because you're right. It isn't all sunshine and roses, and it isn't even all guys doing incredible things in the jungle that just make great war stories. And God knows there are amazing stories that really talk about the sacrifice, the honor, and the contribution these men made, not only to the war in Vietnam, but to our national story. I just kept thinking, I really want to have Rich on the show to give him space to just talk, and I don't care. I didn't have a vision for what you were going to talk about, or I just wanted to hear whatever you had to say, because I knew it would just be the honest truth of what it's like to lose a dad to the Secret War. You guys didn't even know what happened to him. 21 years. And that's where 21 years of folded flag came from. And and another thing I want to add is that, you're talking about all the things you were going through, both physically and emotionally, when you were going through this in 1990, and how surreal it was to be interacting with these guys and be wondering whether or not you fit in and whatnot. I don't know. I just want to say that you fit in here for sure. And this, and I know that that you're part of Tilt's community, because, he reached out to me, for the rollout of 21 Years of Flag and brought me in on the loop, and that's how we met, you and I. But I also just wanted to say that here on the Modern Military History Podcast, it's not just, as I said, it didn't happen in a vacuum. And you definitely have a place here. And I just wanted to take this space to just thank you again for making your time. I know that it wasn't easy for you, and I just really appreciate it. I just wanted to make that space here. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine, actually. It's actually an honor. And, excuse me, the weird thing about this is there's always two sides.
Yeah.
Given the opportunity to talk about this stuff, in a way, it not bragging rights, but it's, I get to talk about my dad and my story, and I love to do that. I love to talk. I'm a typical Leo. I love the spotlight. But there's a weird thing about this, that even when I talk about a movie or do other things or do a screening and answer questions, the last one, especially the lady that did our last live stream, I had a good friend of mine, Oscar Mike Radio, Travis Broddington. He helped me do the live stream. He teamed up with Oscar Mike Radio and Danielle, A Little Dose of Danny is her show. Yeah. And she is a Marine mom, but she noticed it right away, and I knew it, but I never really thought of it consciously. But she said, as soon as the movie started coming on, your demeanor just changed. She said, instantly. And she goes, it's almost like you have to relive it again. I said, you're exactly right. And consciously, I don't think of it like that. But when it's there and I'm talking about it or something, especially, the movie was, I'm like out of my body in a way. This is this is going to sound weird, but this is the job. This is the goal. Turn the switch on, do the job, and get it done. So the emotions and everything don't really come out. But after it was done, and a few times I finally get to sit back and watch it, then it's like, wow. I'm going through the whole damn thing again, And sometimes it's not fun. And so it's not, talking about it's one thing, but there are times where all of a sudden I'll just get a little, and I'll get a little spacey, and I know what's going on. My head's just, something triggered me, and I'm off in La La Land, and it's not, sometimes it's not easy, Yeah. And any grieving, that's another thing. I do get emotional and upset about it sometimes, but you don't know what you're grieving. That's the craziest thing, is like you don't have somebody, like, this is the way I put it to explain it. I said, listen, good friends or whoever I'm talking to, yourself or whatever, if you've had your parents in your life, or your father in this case, whatever, and regardless if you're really close or not, okay, let's not even go there. The fact is, you got a physical person that's been there since day one, right? And I don't give a shit if you're divorced or not. In most cases, you're at least seeing him, they're there, whatnot, right? So if that person dies after so many years of you having that there and you're used to it, that to me is probably 10 times more difficult, because it's tearing away something that's always been there. Okay? With me, I have this weird emotional stuff that I can get really down about. But what is it? I've never had a chance to bond with my father. You know what I mean? And I don't mean to make this like feel bad for me. I'm telling you the flat out truth is that why all of a sudden do I get like that?
Yeah.
It's hard to, and some people say that it's just simply the grief of not knowing. I guess, but it still doesn't register that with me. It's just, I don't understand where it's coming from sometimes. So that makes it even more questionable and difficult because you can't pin it down. Like psychologically, or you go and lay on the couch and you have somebody analyze your head, you're like, well, they can say it all you want, but I'm not sure if I'm going to buy it. You know, I don't really get why I get upset. You know, it's just really weird, you know. But I think it's just a culmination of everything that's, you know, from that, all the crap that went on in my world, and then, you know, maybe even to a point where you get, as you grow up and you things sink in differently.
Yeah.
A lot more different, mature way of looking at things. And I don't know if maturity means that you're able to tap into those emotions more. Maybe. I don't know. You know, I don't know the meaning of that, but something's definitely different, you know. Maybe I finally got some closure, though. That's one thing.
I you know, personally, I have not gone through anything remarkably or anything markedly similar. What I can say is that both my grandfathers were in the Second World War. One of them was in the 16th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Infantry Division and came in as a replacement late in the war. He won a Purple Heart when he was near a landmine blast, and that story has carried on just through the generations. I am lucky that I have some of his artifacts. I never got to meet him. He passed away long before I was ever born. And my second grandfather was in the 26th Infantry Division. He landed on the beaches of Normandy after D-Day and came in and fought through Normandy. And he ended up being in the Battle of the Bulge. He somehow evaded capture when his entire unit was annihilated during the Battle of the Bulge. And he passed away at a young age due to cirrhosis of the liver. He was an alcoholic, and my family on my dad's side told me that, you know, the war definitely affected him. But in a way, I've never been able to connect with either one of these men, and my journey to honor their memory has been to try to preserve their story as best as I can. So it's in this vein, and I'm not at all saying that I have anything to compare to the sacrifice your family has made. But what I see is your devotion to, you know, personal closure is one thing, and I think that's incredibly important. I also see you preserving not only the memory of your father, but the memory of men like your father, because I just keep thinking about SOG had such a high casualty rate. It had such a high casualty rate. And how many people, wives, girlfriends, and children who were left behind. And what does that look like for them? It's not just war stories and, you know, happy tales. So, not that war stories are happy, but I just really, you know, you being able to come on here and talk candidly about this just brings that aspect of the real reality, you know, to so that people can understand. And it is it honors not only the dead but the living as well, because I know that the SOG guys that I have had the privilege, and it's kind of an out-of-body experience for me to work with SOG guys, I'll tell you that right now after reading about them since I was a young guy. And, you know, the amount to which it honors them, because if you've ever spoken with anybody any veteran, but especially it seems SOG guys, like we were talking about, you know, Tilt and his devotion to lift up other stories through his, you know, he's becoming somewhat well known, and God bless him for that. And he is using that to lift up everybody he can. And he's really generous with his time. But you know, it's my privilege to be a part of that. But I see you participating in that as well. So I think we're reaching kind of a natural ending point here. I just wanted to give you the space as we tie things off here. How do people reach you? How do people reach your film, 21 Years of Folded Flag? and how can we forward the conversation in regards to your incredible journey?
Well, you can always reach out to me. You know, as you know, I'm a little tech illiterate at times. I'm getting there. Social media.
Copy that.
You know, my thing's been Facebook because that's the thing I could learn at the time years ago. But you know, I'm spread thin, so I tend to, you know, everybody's on Instagram now, and I'm still not used to that. If you want to reach out to me personally on Facebook, that's fine. Richard A. Fitz Jr. Counter. Counter's a little silly name I came up with. Well, let's put it this way. To go back to the film real quick. We had to last minute do some reenactment. So I myself, my son, good friend of mine, jumped in for a place in Vermont, another military simulations place. Nick Diaz runs it. But he was kind enough to help out with the field. But we were actually using live ammo on that one. And anyway, but we thought it would be a kick to give ourselves nicknames like the SOG guys did.
Yeah.
Names, nicknames. So mine ended up being Counterfeits, you know. So that's how I got that, if anybody asks. But that's on my Facebook. There's also the Richard Allen Fitz documentary, 21 Years page. I try to keep up with those. I am on Instagram. Again, don't know how to use it that well. But that's like, I think it's just 21 years of folded flag or something like that. The film can be purchased. I can, you know, if you want to get in touch with me through there, yes, you can purchase it directly through me. I usually ask for like a donation for the GoFundMe thing, which will probably go for either distribution or the next step with the book or whatever. It's like $15, something like that. Or you can go to my producer's website, which is spirosvideo.com, and just look under documentaries. You can get it right from him too. As far as me telling the story or whatever the second part of your question was, try to continue the story, try to tell it. You know, I'm always willing to, you know, especially things are opening up more, you know, I'll take it personally to you. If you want to help fund me get over to do a screening somewhere out of state, I'll do it. I'll come. We'll raise some money for a local veterans charity or something, do a screening.
Copy that.
You know, anybody that is willing to listen, I've been trying my best to reach out to some other guys that, you know, some of that tilt knows and stuff like that, and see if we can't make it bigger and better, get some more interest. It takes a long time, you know.
Yeah.
You know, like we were talking about the music and stuff. I mean, that was my first attempt at a film, but it was also my very first attempt at doing an entire soundtrack. So I was able to do that for the film, which was a personal thing. But, you know, as you know, I'm sitting here getting things together because I want to try to do more soundtrack work. That's my love. That's what I like to do. So anybody who has interest is another way to, you know, if you want to help me personally, anybody that's doing videos or wants some bumper music for their podcast or anything like that, give me a buzz.
Copy that.
Maybe we'll put something together, you know. There's plenty of stuff you just listen to the trailer. That's all my music. Everything's in there. So if you want some examples, just type in 21 Years of Folded Flag on YouTube. You can watch the trailer. There's also, our live stream is still up. We did a live stream recently, and this is very cool. I got a whole mess of local celebrities and comedians and politicians, and they all did a little videos and personalizing it. And we put a video montage, the whole thing, right before we played the film. But we had a little sound glitch. But what we did was we restarted it at like the 10-minute spot. But all that is still up. And that's going to be it's a long show, so get ready, because there's 23-minute montage. The movie is an hour and a half, and then there's question and answer right after it. So you just type that in, and you'll see it either on my my page that you helped me with, Sons of SOG. It's up on there, and it's also up on Oscar Mike Radio. Copy that.
And that's youtube.com, and your YouTube channel is Sons of SOG. I'm also going to go ahead and, in all versions of this podcast, I'm going to put links to, you know, the purchase site for your movie, links to your social media so people get in touch with you. We're just going to make it just straightforward so people don't even have to Google it. They're just going to scroll down to the description of this podcast and they'll be able to check all this out because you don't want to miss it, folks. This is just, it's not only a monument to your father, to your own journey, but and not even SOG really. This is the story of our, national collective, with military history, and especially with what happens when, unfortunately, as happens in war, men make the ultimate sacrifice. So with this, I want to once again...
It's also a human interest story.
Yeah. What was that? Sorry, just what did you say there, Rich?
Interest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And I think this is true about military history. I love one of the goals of modern military history is to try to just make military history accessible not only to people who are already interested in it, but anybody. I mean, I really can't understand if you don't click on, for instance, the story of when an NVA soldier touches John Stryker Meyer's boot when, they're surrounded by guys hunting for them, how you can't just be immediately drawn in. Or when you hear the stories about what guys did on D-Day, or when you hear this story, that no matter from what walk of life you are, how it doesn't capture you and make you, I guess just capture you is the best way to put it. It captures me, and I'm trying to share that with people because I just think it's so incredibly important, not just for military history, for us as a culture. But with that, I just want to tie us off, and once again, thank you, sir, Rich Fitz Jr., thank you so much, sir, for coming on, for making time for us, and thank you to your family for the sacrifice that you folks made. We always talk about the SOG guys, and we talk about, the war stories, but this is where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. And you making time and you putting in the effort. I know it wasn't easy for you to meet today, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's my pleasure, my friend. Whenever I can, I'll make the time.
Copy that. So, this has been the Modern Military History Podcast with Rich Fitz. I am Andrew Wheeler. Thank you so much again, sir. And to you, the audience, it's not going to happen without you. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Take care.